Welcome to the ISS Brief Podcast, where we explore how sustainability is being applied in practice across organizations. In this episode, I speak with Anthony Reilly, Head of Food Strategy and Sustainability at Gather & Gather Ireland, a contract catering business. Anthony brings a chef's instinct and an operator's pragmatism to sustainability, working at the intersection of food culture, supply chain, waste reduction, and client expectations. From fruit trimmed, turned into carbonated drinks, to bread waste fermented into self-carbonating cans, Gather & Gather is finding creative, commercially grounded ways to close the loop on food waste. This conversation will explore what sustainability looks like on the ground in contract catering, how Scope 3 emissions are being tackled through food sourcing and supplier engagement, and why turning food waste into financial conversations might be the most powerful tool as a sustainability lead has. We hope you enjoyed listening, and for sure, subscribe and listen again. Well, Anthony, thanks a million for joining us today. It's great to have you here. Could you tell us a bit more about Gather & Gather and what your role involves really day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thanks for having us on the podcast. I work for Gather & Gather. We're a food service contract catering business. We operate nationally in Ireland, and I would say we're the leading food service provider. We do things a little bit different. Our ethos is built on scratch cooking. We celebrate local food systems, and we treat our workplace and our other businesses like high street dining experiences.
And in terms of the sustainability program, what did that look like when you came into the role, and kind of what's been your priority since coming into that role around kind of taking action on that program?
The sustainability program at Gather & Gather was really strong when they stepped into the role. There was a solid operational foundation already in place. So they had basic recycling protocols, standard waste tracking. But like a lot of food service sectors, the approach tended to lean towards passive compliance. It was about minimizing harm and hitting just the baseline metrics, So my priority from day one has been to shift the paradigm from that passive compliance to active, I suppose, culinary-led innovation from what I know, my experience. I wanted to move us forward to more of a circular economy model. And since coming in, I suppose my focus has been on systemizing waste reduction directly and how we design our menus. We're launching commercial scale upcycling initiatives and I suppose direct partnerships with Irish agricultures and seafood sectors that will impact emission source as well, but also help with sustainable sourcing.
Yeah, and I think that's something we see as well in other sectors where, a lot of it is compliance for compliance sake or just meeting the minimum threshold. And there's obviously a requirement for a compliance piece, but as you said, trying to step above that and be a leader in the space is key, because generally what you see is businesses who are taking that viewpoint kind of being more reactive to changes rather than kind of proactive by having the systems and the innovative ideas and the changes in place prior to any kind of regulatory changes or market changes that might impact on that side of things too. I think that's an interesting piece you mentioned there as well around kind of your own background, because your background is a professional chef as well. And I suppose you probably had the inside scoop of how a kitchen works, on a day to day, and similarly, the inefficiencies or the wastage that might be a result of that. So how did that kind of shape your approach, that experience kind of stepping into then a more of a sustainability minded role?
Being a professional chef and I suppose the experience that I've had, I know I don't look at it, but I'm 30 years doing this, but it shapes absolutely everything, as we mentioned at the start. It's a chef's instinct, I suppose, combined with, I suppose, an operator's pragmatism. Is, chefs are inherently wired to hate food waste, because in the professional kitchen, waste equals lost margin. So when we look at a bin full of fruit trimmings or surplus bread or the brain, we don't see refuse. We see unharvested value. We see flavor in the bin. We see a culinary opportunity, So having worn the whites for years, and I've also a strong bias towards action over pure analytics. Data is vital nowadays. I suppose because you can't spreadsheet your way out of a climate crisis, can you? So you have to take action, and it starts in the kitchen. It starts with menu design. It starts with talking to suppliers. It's how you build, I suppose, and forward thinking, and it's preventative, as we spoke before, and that is trying to prevent the food waste, and you do that through building up the menu cycles, building up them relationship with suppliers, and making sure you have the right menu cycle, menu balance in place, that you're not wasting in food. So I suppose when my role now is I speak the same language as the kitchen teams, because I've been there. And I'm able to help them ensure that every sustainable initiatives that we introduce is operationally viable and practical, and easy for the teams to implement. So if it doesn't work during the busy lunch rush, it's not sustainable, is it? So yeah, so my background basically is I think it's crucial that it comes from the kid starting point.
Because I think particularly I find within restaurant, the hospitality space, the food space, particularly the sustainability piece around waste, because it's so tangible. Food waste is such a massive piece, not only just from a wastage of resources, but also on the climate crisis as well. Can you give us also a flavor, about those other key impact areas you guys are looking at, or like the risks or opportunities you guys are looking at, including obviously the food waste, because you do really sit at the epicenter there between, the farmer and the agricultural piece and suppliers you're dealing with there, and the local piece, as well as then the actual people who are eating the food, and the customers you're dealing with day to day as well. Could you give us a bit of flavor about what that, I suppose, the whole holistic outlook of sustainability means within the world of kind of contract catering?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose in contract catering, I suppose it's the question of sustainability is about scale. So we're not just like a little high street restaurant. It says we manage a compound and footprint of serving thousands of meals every day. So, and it's across a highly fragmented network of client sites. So it's like the diversity is different between every site. So I think the key impact areas are undeniably food waste and carbon emissions. It's all tied to food transport and the ecological footprint through agriculture, and I suppose what we're working on at the moment closely is the fishing industry. Bigger risks, I think, is greenwashing and fractured execution. I suppose letting initiatives break down across our different sites. I suppose that's where we find an impact of our challenge, is that it needs to be consistent. But again, from a food waste point of view and from a sustainable point of view, the opportunity is massive. Because of our scale, we can act like as a live testing ground for food system transformation. We can drive massive aggregate demand for local producers, and we have a unique opportunity to influence daily eating habits for thousands of corporate clients, I think. And it's given confidence then to them different corporate clients, because when you have sustainability people leading client sites, they don't have that knowledge of being in the kitchen or the food system operating, or how we deal, or how we even talk to suppliers. And I think it's to give them confidence. Going to say we have like certain initiatives where, as we said earlier, spreadsheets can sit in the shelf for years and the main things, but like meaningful data is like we can kind of pinpoint, and through that massive scale of where our waste streams are coming from, we can pinpoint all them different touch points where we can then build the data to give the client confidence. But then that gives us the tools to go back to wherever source we need to go back to kind of fix any sustainable issues, whether it's carbon emissions, or whether it's food waste, or whether it's products that are coming in that are, I suppose, impacting our own menu cycles. So the impact, I think, is what we have good impact from. An opportunistic is we have a scale, and we have the ability to work with large suppliers and large clients.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, because as you said, like the opportunity, as I said, sitting at that epicenter piece, both from being a major buyer of like local produce, and then similarly being I suppose an entity that can make change on the consumers and how they think about food and eat food, and waste, and the wastage of that food waste as well is key. And I think that's one thing I think we should be good to deep dive a bit more into, because I know you're doing a lot in that space.
Yeah.
You mentioned as well at the start, when you kind of came into the role, there was obviously a compliance piece that was there and ticked the box. And you're kind of now bringing this forward to taking the step beyond that kind of threshold, and how you can actually lead within the space. Do you find, like, was that drive coming internally, or are you finding, you're also getting pushed from a market perspective, and clients beginning to ask more questions on that, or is there another driver as well that's kind of pushing the business forward when it comes to their own sustainability journey or transition?
Yeah, I think it's a multi-directional, convergence right now. I think historically you might have pointed to a single factor, but today I suppose it's an ecosystem press, right? So I think when you look at, I suppose from my point of view, coming in, and the experience I've had previous to starting this role, it's you look at the Irish food system for a start, and you kind of like, go, how do we impact that? So I think it's common knowledge that, like, from a growing point of view in horticulture, we're down to 74 growers in Ireland, right? So, and that's down from 600 about 3 or 4 years ago. So like, we have, as I said in the previous, is we have the ability to impact that, as like, from a high buying power. But also it's not about that. It's about kind of helping the growers grow, and that ticks a lot of boxes when it comes to sustainability. When it comes to, like, buying local and getting people, it's carbon emissions, it's local produce, it's health benefits added to it, and it's supporting local businesses, it's the economy. There's a whole lot of factors in that, and that's one of the things that I wanted to do coming in as a starting point, is how do we buy more Irish, or keep that? How do we help, our beer and the likes of the growers, better? But then from I suppose from a commercial point of view, or from our client side point of view, they also have their own ambitious ESG targets and Scope 3 commitments that we're seeing a lot more of. And I suppose it ties all together a little bit, which is good, because you see now when we're going into different contracts, it's like sustainability is nearly, from a scoring system, top of the priorities as well. So, but what's interesting with, I suppose, with their ESG targets and Scope 3 commitments, we can support them, and we can, there's a couple of clients that we work closely with on helping them with their Scope 3 commitments and their ESG targets, and helping them report their own food waste, post-consumer wastes, and what's being taken away from their waste management systems going forward. So there's good synergy in it now, rather than just going, well, here's your report at the end of the quarter, or your yearly report. So there's more of collaboration now with clients, and you can see it more and more coming in, as in quarterly business reviews. Sustainability is on the agenda a lot more, and I suppose what we're bringing to that is that kind of back to the very start of how we source our foods, and the traceability of it from a starting point, and then how that all intertwines with Scope 3 and food waste, and supporting, I suppose, government led initiatives as well. So
there's benefits in buying local from a carbon emissions perspective, but also, as I said, from a social perspective and a community piece. And then that naturally feeds into what you can provide a client from a Scope 3 perspective, in terms of, we're doing X, Y, and Z, which is going to have an impact on your Scope 3 if you if you work with us over a competitor. So do you see, back to, I suppose, the opportunity side, that there obviously is a huge opportunity side from yourselves as a business, taking this path, particularly when going for a new business with clients, because you can showcase, you're going to have an impact on your ESG commitments while working with Gather. And that client kind of side of things, and the tenders, because there's another piece we're seeing as well, particularly, with a bit of a slowdown on the regulation side, the market is beginning to be the driver for a lot of businesses, those larger businesses who are maybe still in scope for reporting, mandatory reporting perspective, still have targets set out on their Scope 3, and a lot of them focusing on how they minimize that Scope 3. How have that client expectations around sustainability changed? Have you seen a change? And what kind of are they asking for now that they weren't kind of before?
Shift has been massive. Clients they've moved completely past, like, just asking for, like, say, compostable cups or basic recycling percentages. They want broad, I suppose, feel good marketing stories. They don't want that marketing story anymore. Do you know what I mean? They're asking for data. They want verified reductions in Scope 3 emissions, and that's associated with what food we buy. They want transparent ingredient traceability. They want concrete measurable proof of how our food waste is being actively diverted from landfills or upcycled, right inside their own, building or locations. And I think with the data part of it as well is how we track then. Everything needs to be tracked then from the scope 3, from the food waste point of view. And I think technology and all plays a part in that and how we do that, So I think most of our clients are technology driven as well. So they expect that from the tech side of things, don't they? So they want to see you only speak in their language at the same time as well. But yeah, definitely there's been a massive shift, I feel, compared to even 5 years ago.
And it seems to be accelerating as well as businesses are pushing more for this, both from a public procurement perspective, but also that filtering into the private piece. And that, I think that's one thing that's really interesting in the role you guys play, particularly as a business, because, obviously food waste is a huge challenge, which also has a massive impact on climate change due to GHG emissions. And, obviously one way of combating food waste is minimizing the amount of wastage and the amount of, waste of supply of goods as well. And you guys obviously sit within that epicenter, as I said, from not only your own actions, being a contributor to your client's scope 3, minimizing your client's scope 3, but as you said, the fact that you can have a role in minimizing food waste also minimizes their scope 3 at the other end, I suppose, of the upstream value chain piece for those clients. And I suppose it'd be good to understand, how you are approaching that, because I know that's a big opportunity piece you view from a gather perspective. So, how do you approach that food waste challenge, and what's working, what's not? It'd be good to kind of deep dive into a bit more of that, because it's obviously a huge commercial asset to how you deal with clients and how you're, servicing them, etc.
Our core approach is, I suppose, it's a circular philosophy. We look at waste as an ingredient, which is, I suppose, a different stage of its life. Working for us on the ground is combining the data-driven menu engineering with creative culinary upcycle. So, for example, instead of letting fruit prep and trim waste, go to landfill, we've developed processes to where we transform those trimmings into functional carbonated botanical beverages, which is going out and speaking to, little microbreweries that can help support that. From there, we then look at other opportunities where, when we use our data, we can identify where our waste streams are. You can't avoid things like fruit trim, and you can't avoid things like leftover bread. And there's only so many croutons you can make, So we even taken the surplus bread waste, and we have another supplier that's testing using bread waste as a ferment into self-carbonating drinks. That eliminates then forced carbonation. So it reduces carbon emissions in a different way, where we're using, a natural source like bread or leftover stale bread to carbonate drinks. But look, our philosophy from the start is always preventing it. We don't want to be able to say, well, oh, look, we have fruit trim, let's just give it to the brewery and he'll make it, so it doesn't matter. It does matter. We always look for ways within our ingredients and have a plan for them. So menu engineering is a big thing. We work as a team. We work ahead of ourselves. We work a quarter ahead of ourselves. We look at what's in season. We look at what available ingredients we have. And then when we're putting them on the menu, we look at, well, what do we do with the waste? What do we do with the trimmings? By integrating, I suppose, the systems that we use through, say, Nutritics and Positive Carbon, we're almost able to, I suppose, predict our procurement. And then Positive Carbon, they're always innovative when it comes to how we collect data or how we manage our food waste. And they're even looking at things if we can give them our menu cycle, they can identify where they see the waste streams potentially going to happen before it happens. So from that prevention point. So a lot of work goes into that pre-menu engineering part. So starts again with I suppose, what's our concept? What's our ideology? We want to cook everything from scratch, as I said at the start. We pride ourselves on procurement, and we pride ourselves on using local. But part of that, when we look at our suppliers, I suppose what it used to look like was, you just squeeze the supplier for the best price. But now it's a collaboration. Now you're talking to them. Now we're planning with them. So, you're planning with the farmer, of what we planting for next year, or we're planning that if we take this, that they have the ability to grow something else. And then we're planning kind of what size they look like. So so there's a whole lot of work that goes in. And another example would be working with BIM and our local fish supplier Kish, where we're planning now about using underutilized or what we say now is alternative fish species. So what that does is it keeps Irish fishermen fishing in Irish waters instead of us importing, I suppose, the common cod, trout, salmon. And it's working with them to go, well, how do we, and you think it's a simple thing by asking the fish supplier, oh, well, just give us in 20 kilos. That's just a whole load of, it's very interesting. It's a whole lot of work that goes in behind the scenes that we know that there's like Gurnard and Megrim or white sole in the sea. But the steps to get them out of the sea and onto your plate, I mean, it's so complex. And I suppose if people understood that a little bit more, then support, and I suppose gone off tangent a bit, but supports then could go into Irish fisheries a bit more. And it's the same going back to the farms. It's when you go out and see a farm, you might have in your head when we talked about Ballymckenny potatoes, so we're quite, I suppose, popular around for their heritage potato around the country. And you have in your head going, I could do this, or I could ask Maria to do that for me. But it's only when you go out there and you spend a bit of time with them, you go, okay, it's not that easy, to just, call them up and do this. You have to collaborate, right? So that's the starting point. And from that collaboration and from understanding where the ingredients come from and understanding, what it takes. And I think when we bring our chefs to these things, we bring our culinary teams to workshops to make them understand that, you use the whole program, what it takes to grow a potato. So don't just go, chop it in half or take lumps out of the skin. Maybe you don't need to take the skin off. Keep the skin on. Roast it a different way. And it's looking at then different cookery techniques as well. They're also healthy. That are also kind of keep the wellness element for our clients. But also it's keeping the vegetable whole, because, I mean, from a health point of view, keeping skin on vegetables, keeping skin on stuff, that's where the nutrition is. So yeah, a lot of it goes into that menu engineering piece before you even, I suppose, upload your menu onto the client's platform. So that's kind of our approach. And it's, sorry, I know it's a bit long-winded, but like, people have to understand the steps that it takes in that procurement piece. It takes time. It's not like it's not an overnight thing where you have to keep working, and you have to plan, and you're planning 5 years in advance, like especially for the likes of potatoes and I suppose it's longevity grown ingredients and stuff like that. And then with the fisheries and thing, and then we do little small culinary workshops with our teams. We have a Michelin star chef come with us to one of our locations in Airfield Estate on this Friday, where he has experience of farm to fork, where we'll take the broad beans, for example, and we'll bring the stem, the broad bean and the leaf, and he's going to show our chefs how you use the whole lot, whether it's turn into a drink, or it's into a garnish or a pickle or whatever. So yeah, we do a lot of work behind the scenes with our teams and with our suppliers.
It's fascinating, to be honest, because as you said, the fact you're sitting right there, and it's so easy, I think, for businesses, particularly across a supply chain or value chain, to kind of just be within their own four walls, where like if you kind of put your head above those walls and just take a longer term holistic viewpoint of the whole system, and how, the collaboration piece there that you described is just so, it just makes, it's common sense. You know what I mean? That like, why wouldn't you work with the suppliers locally to understand what can seasonally be grown, and then similarly working with your own staff to understand how that can be reshaped or formed within a menu that then at the output is going to reduce the amount of food that you waste, which not only is it having an environmental impact, but it's having a financial impact on the business. And then vice versa, as you said, it's also having a nutritional impact on the people that are eating it. And, there's a health benefits to that as well. And like, it's I suppose that disconnect in like the world we live in is huge. And I think, it like oftentimes people struggle with that. Like, what is sustainability? Is it just a marketing piece? But it's actually not. It's just like, as you said, we can make this whole system cleaner. And I think, I suppose the where you sit is just, it's such a concrete example of what can be done, and like as you said, it's not an overnight thing. There's a lot of work involved, and there's different people to be engaged. But taking taking the steps you have done, you've seen a huge impact on it across, commercial and environmental and people kind of aspects,
I mean, you could talk about it all day, and I think
Yeah.
it's, if you take the word sustainability out of it, right, I think it's just the right thing to do. I think from living in a country like Ireland, I think how green we are as a country, and the ability to grow amazing produce, that's just one. And then our seafood. Look, I mean, I always go back to the question, and it's why aren't we eating more seafood in Ireland? We're one of the few countries in Europe that's completely surrounded by the ocean, there is the export element and all of that nonsense. But I think the more people buy Irish and support local business and local fishers and stuff like that, as you said, that it ticks a lot of boxes from helping. So, but I mean, just take the word sustainability out of it for a minute, and it's why wouldn't you be getting a piece of fish with vegetables that are local, or a piece of Irish chicken with locally grown potatoes? Just makes sense. Yeah, and I think that's what our grandparents were doing,
Yeah.
And they weren't marketing sustainability back then. It was just, that was the right thing to do. You bought your bread from the local bakery. You bought,
Yeah, it doesn't make sense that we're buying stuff from Peru. Do you know what I mean? It's just
and I think anyone that's putting stuff like that on the menus. So if you're putting strawberries on the menu in December, you're obviously importing them, but that's people need to realize, having a big impact on your own country's infrastructure. Because what if you were to buy berries that were in season or whatever from the local? That gives them, they can pick that. Then that gives them a plan to grow again more for next year. And that's the impact, because when you buy, there's a local radish supplier down and little things like radishes down in Stradbally. By buying the produce off him, he can grow double next year, because he knows, well, these are going to buy it off me, so he can grow double. If we're not buying them and they're importing from somewhere else, then he's like, so no one's buying it, sure, I can't waste a crop. And then people, to realize, so when you grow a potato, and this is fascinating, right? You learn all the time. You grow a potato on a piece of land, you can't use that plot where you've grown the potatoes for another 5 years.
Wow.
You have to switch the plots. So potato farmers they're forecasting 5 years in advance. So imagine having to forecast you're growing that back into that plot in 5 years' time, and hoping someone's going to buy it off you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But you have companies, or you have got people that are importing potatoes from France, and you're wondering why. So I think that's the thing. If people understand, and yourself, there's a lot of information out online now on AI and everything else, and telling you what to eat and what not to eat. But I think eat what you grow what you eat. Kind of that just makes perfect sense. But I could go on about this all day, and I think it's something I'm passionate about. But it's yeah.
No, I think, as you said, it's when you take the word sustainability out of it, it's just it just makes, particularly for a business like Gather and Gather that's working, it just makes commercial sense, business perspective, because you're reducing waste, you're buying local, you're supporting community. Just too many benefits to kind of ignore. One piece you leverage on there, and I suppose that kind of came up through that, is the understanding across, your own staff, thinking through menus and how designing menus. But then also, that behavioral change when it comes to the people who are actually eating the food. And you shared with me, obviously offline, some ideas and innovative tools and tricks that you've done as well in terms of trying to change that behavior on ground with people who are actually eating the food. It'd be great to get your insight on that and what you've kind of tried and done, and the impact that's had as well.
I think it's a trial I've done previous, where I think when you look at post-consumer waste, so you do have some contracts that have free issue, that the companies are supplying the food for free for their employees. So there's an element that you have to look at as in post-consumer waste. So because they have the ability to take what they want to at lunchtime. So when you're looking at then, so we would track then what they would leave on the plate, if they leave anything on the plate. And we weigh that and we track what's in it, and using our AI systems, we're able to identify what was the most, out of the menu on Wednesday, what was the most. And so, for example, we were looking at the broccoli. So yeah, I think from that behavior, I suppose it's working then with the client and working with their teams to say, well, how do we influence then that change in the consumer? And we tried a lot of different things with the size of the plate. We've done pilots like Fork Friendly, where everything on the plate is edible. There's no like bones or stalks or stems or lemon wedges or stuff like that. And that actually helps, stuff going into the bin from a weight point of view. And yeah, and when we track, like we would track for a week or two what the consumer was eating, and like privately, and say nothing. Then we would take the metrics, the data from, we would find out what the waste items was, what part of the day, and get all the data from, I suppose, their eating behavior across that day or that particular week. And then we would put the menu on again in 2 weeks' time. But what we would do then is we would make signage. We would have some, I suppose, table toppers, or, plant the seed kind of signage, that not in your face, but subtly, and say for broccoli, did you know, the most wasted item across the lunchroom is broccoli, or rice, or, protein. And you put the same menu on again, and it'd be the same cohort of people, and you'd see a reduction in all the different metrics. People, they follow each other. We've done a lot of work, like, where you'd look at queue management, and you look at people's behavior in the queue, and they always follow the person in front of them. It's quite interesting. If somebody's taking, at breakfast time, 3 poached eggs, the following person more than likely will take 3 poached eggs. It's, I don't know what it is. It's just that behavior. So it's, people say sheep follow sheep, don't they? So, but yeah, we've done a lot of work in that space from a behavioral science point of view, and just to kind of see, just to try and nudge behaviors, or nudge people in the right direction without having to do big campaigns and stuff like that. But it is quite interesting to find out from post-consumer. Like, we talked a lot about pre-consumer and how we manage that, but even post-consumer, when people have taken their food and then they're disposing of it, like, why are they leaving particular items on the plate? Why haven't they eaten it? We want to find that out as well, because again, that's still our problem. That's still waste going into the bin, and there's a cost to that. There's a cost to us. There's a cost to the company from the waste management point of view. There's a whole lot of costs associated to that from a commercial point of view. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing where you try and look at people's behaviors and the demographic nowadays. I suppose they're eating smaller portions. The younger generation, they're eating more protein, so we've seen a big shift to this. I suppose my generation, where it was heavy carb meals at lunch, and that's not the case anymore. Where it's they're having lighter lunches with more protein, and so you have to look at that demographic change as well when we're going into the different businesses, and see their behaviors as well. They're eating a lot more, but a lot less portions, if that makes sense. So they'll probably eat, instead of twice a day, they'll probably eat 3 or 4 times a day, but smaller portions. There's a lot of that kind of visual and watching the behaviors that needs to happen as well, and that does happen. And all of them little kind of nudges, you're just trying to make people making the right choices and the better choices. As I was saying, it's like, if you can take what you want, well, take what you can eat. Look, if you're still hungry, you can come back up for more. Don't just take the double portion thinking I'm going to eat this and
throw it out.
Whatever, So it's them kind of nudges, and again, it's you look at the corporate responsibility of when they're onboarding people into programs like this. Is, I think that, for me, in my opinion, you have a part as you're on board and go, look, we're going to supply you with food, we're going to have free food. And some companies, that's an attraction to attract people into their organization, is that their workplace experience is really good. Part of that is they offer free food or whatever other amenities they're offered. But then they should be like, okay, we also have strict sustainability goals. So when you're having your food, just be mindful.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think that.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. Yeah.
And like as well, like it's so easy for businesses probably in that space just to not look at it, but like the data can tell you so much that can have such a financial impact as well.
Yeah.
So like it's.
And if you don't have the data, then you can't make the change. Do you know what I mean? So if you don't have that kind of, if you don't have that breakdown of where everything is where your touch points are of, how do you make the change?
I think that's what's really powerful as well, is like, across that. And again, that's probably one thing that's come out for me, is across both supply, your internal operations in terms of your people and getting them upskilled, not only from like, you know, they're also professional chefs, they know how to cook, but just from a produce perspective, understanding where the food comes from and how it can be utilized differently, or like you said, this is a seasonal produce, how do we use that, to also then the consumer side, the people you're feeding, and how you can with cues educate them in terms of the different options and how you learn and how they eat, and how that can kind of then also change your internal business. And I think it's just fascinating across the whole scope. You're addressing those areas because across the whole scope you have a clear impact, you know, across those areas.
Yeah. And you're
What?
nearly looking at it from, people say farm to fork. Like, it's nearly,
Yeah.
you'd be looking at a farm to the bin truck arrives, isn't
Yeah.
it? So
Yeah.
it's there's that layer. There's so many layers of, from when the food has been picked to where it ends up, you know.
Hmm.
And a lot of people have to be responsible for it, not just the chefs either. So
There's a lot there, and you've done a lot, Anthony, which is like, it's commendable, and it's fascinating as well. Like, but I suppose from your perspective, you know, what does that next phase now of your program look like for within Gather and Gather, and I suppose what's the, you know, what does the next few years kind of, what's your goals, your aims, your pathways, you know?
yeah, well, I suppose one of the big company goals and the overarching company goals is to reduce, net zero, the net
Mm.
zero scope emissions. You know, I think most companies do it by 2030. I think that's something we're working towards as well as company. And I think it's to have a food program where, you know, we look at food waste as a prevention, and we look at sustainability as a thing. And I suppose we want to be, and I don't say leader, like, it shouldn't be a competitive thing where it's like we want to be the best at, you know, working with local suppliers. I think it's everyone's responsibility to do that, but like, it's something we pride ourselves on.
Mm.
And I think it's to continue that charge. And I think we would love to have impact on getting that growing footprint back from 74 back up to the hundreds, getting more, you know, and helping impact Ireland as a growing nation, impact the fisheries, and I suppose keep as much as we can on the island of Ireland, and get more people back in business. And that's a big part of that, which will take a few years. And it's working with like the horticulture department and Board B and BIM and Guaranteed Irish, who we're all accredited with. It's working with the corporate clients to support us on that. You know, there's a whole lot of factors in there, and in turn from there, then we set ourselves up then for a better food system, a better choice where we can have, you know, an Irish pantry of ingredients to work with, and then infrastructure then on the ground from day-to-day operational. It's, look, we are a business at the end of the day, and we see the true cost of waste, which can be literally thrown away, gross profit. You know, when we throw food away, you're not just losing the raw ingredients, you're throwing away the labor cost required to prep it, the energy cost used to store it, to cook it, you know. You're paying the commercial waste disposal fees, or, you know, to get a hold of the way. So we want to minimize that, you know, because we're still a business. But also, you know, have a culinary team and have a food operations team that pride themselves on minimizing waste, and have the tools to, and I suppose my job to provide them with the tools to be able to do that. And look, I think I'll always say AOA has a big part to play in this as well. And I think the information you can get from them partners we have from an AI point of view is crucial, as we touched on. The data that comes out of it is, and teaching the teams how to read that data and you know, apply it into their daily operations. That is huge when it comes to prevention, because when we set our overarching goals for, say, food waste, for example, of what we want to reduce, we do a quarterly basis. Then we have an overarching company goal. You can't hit them goals without data, you know. So
Yeah.
I suppose that's where the future is, and this keeps driving on. And I think, personally, I feel that, I don't know what you think, but I think I've noticed in the last few months that a lot of companies are taking the foot off the pedal when it comes to food waste and stuff like that, and it's something that we don't want to do. and I'm trying to understand why that is, and it's, you know, but I don't know if you've noticed it, Noel. I don't know, but I just feel like there's so much more work to be done, as we've touched on, from everywhere, and I think if people take the foot off the pedal, it's going to be detrimental, you know.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I think we've seen come last year with the change in regulations. You know, I think a lot of businesses were probably standing up and looking at it and moved up the to-do list with regulations, but obviously with the change and uncertainty, and then, you know, as you said, there's been a lot of changes in the market, both with, you know, AI coming on stream and similarly, you know, energy crisis with wars going on. So the market is kind of in sway, but I agree. I think a lot of businesses have either step back and are maybe more so quietly going about their work, or have, you know, paused what they're doing due to the uncertainty. But I do feel that it is coming back, and like as you outlined, like it shouldn't be either viewed, because the businesses that are going to take the advantage of this are the ones like yourselves who, you know, not only view it as the right thing to do, but it makes complete financial sense, and also, you know, you can have an impact on the wider society, but also from a risk and risk mitigation perspective, it makes financial sense. If you're buying in local produce and from a diversified set of farmers locally, you know, you're going to be less hit by any you know, physical risk from climate that impacts, you know, drought in other regions that you can't get your produce from. And I think that's I suppose you have a clear kind of cut risk associated with that, because you're dealing with farmers straight from the gate, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anthony, look, this is really fascinating. And it was great to get your time in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Noel. Really appreciate it. It's a good chat. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that brings us to the end of this episode. A big thank you to Anthony for such a candid and energizing conversation. It's rare to hear sustainability discussed with this combination of culinary creativity, commercial honesty, and genuine ambition. If you found this episode useful, you can explore how practical insights, case studies, and our resources from the Institute of Sustainability Studies. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.